the invasion of Parthia, his ultimate aim. Having pacified Britannia and Germania, consolidated his position in Rome, and defeated the barbarians of the Danube, he simply needed to deal with a belligerent Armenia and a grumbling Alexandria, and the invasion could proceed. Armenia was a technically independent vassal state of Rome, but bordering Parthia, it was a constant bone of contention, shifting from the influence of one empire to the other depending on who was on the throne. It would have to be dealt with before the operation against Parthia could begin. Alexandria was a different proposition, however. Since the reign of Augustus Caesar, it had been an imperial province, and though in all that time it had never been in outright rebellion against Roman rule, it was constantly simmering, and often boiling over into open riots. Caracalla had resolved to ensure the passivity of this vital part of the Roman Empire prior to continuing his adventure, and also, Oclitinius had informed Silus, to raise funds, which were running dangerously low, despite his liberal bleeding of the richest of the Roman elite. The city had a feel of unrest now, Silus thought, as he strolled nonchalantly into the agora, the wide meeting place and market that was the Greek equivalent of the Roman Forum. Philosophers and prophets stood on the steps of temples and sermonized to passers-by with threats of doom if they didn't turn from their evil ways or delivered unsought advice on how to live a fulfilled life. Stallholders cried out for custom, advertising their fresh fish, fruits, perfumes, shoes, jewellery and slaves. Prostitutes propositioned lone males, and in some cases accompanied males, much to the disgust of their partners. But there were others hanging around with less clear purposes. Groups of men skulked, looking sullen, leaning against walls, carving inscriptions, throwing stones, with occasional fights breaking out between them. Women and old men shot them concerned glances and rushed to complete their business so they could hurry home, ushering oblivious children and grandchildren before them. Silus had been in Alexandria before and had found himself in the midst of a full-blown riot. He knew how easy it was for this city to explode, and the presence of Caracalla with his army outside the city was more like pouring oil on a fire than on troubled waters. But that was not Silas's problem at that moment. He had been tasked with keeping tabs on an imperial freedman called Eugenios. Formerly, Eugenios had worked closely with Festus, the late commander of the Sacred Bedchamber and head of one of Caracalla's spy organisations. His successor was the freedman eunuch Sempronius Rufus, who had already been the head of the Bureau of Memoirs, and Oclitinius was suspicious of the man's increasing power and the trust shown in him by Caracalla. Eugenios was now in Rufus's employ, but an informer had passed intelligence to Oclitinius that Eugenios was conspiring against Caracalla. Whether he was involved with the conspirators who had supported Festus and were never found, or was acting under orders from Rufus, or there was some other conspiracy brewing, Oclitinius did not know, and he had tasked Silus with finding out. Eugenios was a short man, which was irritating when it came to tailing someone. He disappeared in and out of the crowd, and Silus had to stick closer to him than he liked to avoid losing him completely. Silus had cut his teeth tracking wolves and deer in northern Britannia under his father's cruel and judgmental tutelage, and graduated to hunting barbarian, Caledonian and Meaty. Tracking a man through a city had obvious differences, but the basics were the same, and besides, Silus had had much experience since he had joined the Arcani. So he was able to follow Eugenios from the Roman camp, through the Canopic Gate, down the Canopic Way, and past the Gymnasium and the Temple of Saturn to this spot. Eugenios occasionally stopped abruptly, took a random turn, or loitered at a market stall, but his craft was clumsy, amateurish, and he showed no signs of noting his tail. Silus followed him through the agora and out of the southern side, and